What's going on, everybody? So in today's video, we are going to be talking about how to analyze a real estate investment deal, a fixer-upper rehab deal. And there's really about three core strategies I like to use, some which are better for beginners, some which are better for more advanced people, but we'll go into all three strategies. So, strategy number one is the Zillow formula. And it's not really much of a formula. It's basically just looking at the Zillow estimate, putting the property into Zillow to determine if there's a large difference between the Zillow estimate and the potential sales price that you'd purchase it at. And, you know, look, we could debate for a long time about how accurate the Zillow estimate is and things like that. However, generally speaking, every property that I've ever purchased, there's always been a very large difference between what I purchased it for and then the Zestimate. So if the Zestimate is like $300,000, you typically would want to be at like $200,000 or sometimes even $150,000, just as like a general rule of thumb. I get questions all the time from investors that are like, is this a good deal? And I mean, the first thing I ask them is like, look, have you even looked at this property on Zillow? I mean, do you even have a general like reference point to what you think this might be worth? Or are you just sending me the deal just because you got a lead? You know, you need to spend, it takes about 30 seconds to look up the Zestimate. So that would be like the very first thing I would do if you're a beginner investor. Tip number two would be to use the Mayo formula, the maximum allowable offer formula. And this is kind of like the industry standard. So this is good for properties in the price range of, let's say, about $100,000 to about $300,000, $350,000. And the way it works is you take the after renovated value. So the after renovated value, you find out what the property sell for fixed up. So let's say that's $200,000, and you multiply that times 0.7, and then you subtract for the cost of repairs. So if a property is going to sell renovated for $200,000, you multiply that times 0.7, which would be $140,000, and then you subtract for the cost of repairs, which let's say is $40,000 for this example property, which would bring you to a maximum allowable offer of $100,000. Now I know that sounds really low, and you probably think there's no properties out there like that, but if you're marketing, you will actually find properties out there that meet that criteria. And when you do find properties that meet that criteria, you need to move quickly, get them under contract, and get to closing as soon as possible. Now, depending on the neighborhood that you're in or the amount of repairs required, you might actually move that 0.7 up or down. So if it's in a neighborhood, for example, where let's say you're just not familiar with, or maybe property sit on the market for like 6 months, you might want to be more conservative and go down to like 0.65 or even 0.6, just because you want to build in more forgiveness in case anything goes wrong. That being said, if you're in a very, let's say, high-end neighborhood where maybe properties sell for $800,000 and maybe the house doesn't need a ton of work, you can actually go above that 0.7 number. I mean, I know some investors that go to 0.75, even 0.8, if it doesn't need a ton of work and if the price range is a pretty high price point. So lastly, the third way to evaluate a real estate investment deal would be the obvious. You want to use a deal analyzer. Every real estate investor should have a deal analyzer of some sort. And there's a lot of free templates out there online. If you talk to a hard money lender, they can probably send you one for free. You can use the one that I have. It'll be in the link in this video. But you want to use a deal analyzer because you want to obviously know the exact potential profit that you might make. So a good deal analyzer is going to take into account closing costs, financing costs for hard money if you're using that, or private money, real estate commissions, holding costs, things like that, repair costs obviously. And basically the way it works is you're going to plug in like 5 or 6 different points of data, and it's going to spit out, you know, okay, this one's going to make 20,000, 100,000, negative 20,000. So if you're not sure about a deal, definitely use a deal analyzer. And a thing to know about that is with rehabs, you want to almost always make at least 10% net profit. Anything below 10% net profit is you're kind of getting into like a risky area, which if you're a newer investor, I definitely would not recommend you do. I mean, ideally you want to be more at like 15 or even 20%, but 10% at a bare minimum. Especially if it's a big rehab project, because with big rehab projects, there's always so many moving pieces. And with bigger rehab projects, you definitely want to be more like the 15% end of things versus like, if it was like a 1-bedroom condo where everything sells quickly, I would have no problem doing 10% just because there's not a ton of variables in that. So there you have it, 3 different ways to analyze a real estate investment deal. And just to recap, number 1 would be using the Zillow value. You should always be comparing what you would potentially purchase a property at to the Zestimate to kind of get a good rule of thumb to see if it's a good deal. Number 2, you should be using the MAO formula, the Mayo formula. That's the industry rule, industry standard for the most part. And that's a very quick way to determine if it's a good deal or not. And even if you're just in the ballpark of MAO, and maybe it doesn't meet it 100%, you can probably still wholesale it to somebody or maybe even purchase it yourself. And lastly, you want to use a deal analyzer. So I would look online for real estate rehab deal analyzers. If you want to use the one I have, you can just look in the comments section of this video and I'll put a link to it. But the deal analyzer is going to be your best bet when it comes to analyzing deals. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please give me a like, please subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. All right, bye.